Hello everyone, just a quick word from your friendly editor/husband. For all of you who listen to So I'm Watching This Show and own an Android device, do me a favor. Go to the Google Play Store and download the Podcast Republic app. It's a fantastic app that allows you to get all of your favorite podcasts directly on your Android devices. I use the app and love it. I can search for the podcasts I want to listen to, select them as favorites, and have them all just a click away. Make sure you set So I'm Watching the Show as a favorite so you don't miss any new episodes. Again, the app is Podcast Republic, available on your Android device. Thanks!
So, I was at the grocery store the other day, and guess what I found?
What'd you find?
Accent.
What's that?
MSG.
Oh!
It was, really hard to find for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's, I guess back now, because that whole hysteria was not true and also weirdly racist. Because people were like, I had a pound of Chinese food and then my cheeks got flushed and my heart was beating. And it's like...
It's not the MSG. It's just that you shouldn't be eating that much Chinese food.
It's so weird. It's so weird. Just trying it.
Yeah.
They're they weirdly advertise it like a salt substitute. And
well, it's like a meat tenderizer.
Yeah. It tastes the way, and I'm not just saying this, but it tastes the way Chinese food used to taste.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
I was like, that weird kind of back of your palate tang thing?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if the place that I like, Lucky China, if they still use it, because that's the only place that I like the Chinese food from. But yeah,
maybe.
So I've definitely, because it kind of tastes a little bit like baking soda, but yeah.
Okay.
So I haven't gone overboard. Don't worry. I'm not going to be dousing everybody with MSG.
Yeah. I just tell me if it's in something that you're cooking for me.
When I made the chicken pasta the other day for my parents, I just used it when I was sauteing the chicken.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but yeah, it's weird. I kind of love it. Hello, everybody. I am Will.
And I'm Kristen.
And this is So I'm Watching This Show. On today's episode, we're going to have a conversation about a movie that we revisited. It had been a while since you'd seen it, correct?
I don't know. I was watching it and I feel like I watched it last year, and it was to the point where I had to look it up on our website to make sure we hadn't already done it, because I was like, this seems too familiar.
We were short episodes, and you were like, well, Tuesday's Mardi Gras. We could do something for Mardi Gras. And you were like, why not Interview with a Vampire? That's in New Orleans. And I was like,
yeah, I was like, something New Orleans-y. Yeah.
Because in hindsight, what's vampires and actually has Mardi Gras.
True Blood?
Dracula 2000.
Dracula 2000! Shit, you're right.
That's more of an Easter movie. Yeah.
Oh God, it is so biblical in a way.
It's an Easter movie, yeah. Because they changed her name to Mary from Nina to Mary, but it had been a long time since I had seen it. But to your point, it's interesting how much of it was seared into my memory in a good way. But this movie actually weirdly means a lot to me, considering it had been a very long time since I had seen it. And so I was kind of nervous to rewatch it, because I was like, oh God, I felt like in my bones it was going to be one of those that when I watch now, I'd be like, ooh. And
no.
It has a few warts, I think, but...
Well, I mean...
not many, but...
It came out in 1993, so...
94.
Or 94.
Yeah. Did you have any... Because I have a monologue about my introduction to it. Did you have any specific memories or anecdotes?
I literally don't remember the first time I watched this movie. It feels like I've always known it. In a way, I know that I can't have seen it when it came out because it's so inappropriate for, 9-year-olds, but
it was more brutal than I remember.
Yeah, but it's sort of like I don't remember a time before I ever saw it, which is weird.
It's one of those movies, I don't know how universal this is, but at least for me, it's one of those movies that it's like, I can't remember a time, it's almost legendary. I can't remember a time when I didn't know of its existence.
Yeah.
from like trolling the Errol's video.
If you think $2 can't buy you much entertainment anymore, take a look at what Errol's Video Club members are watching tonight.
Any excuse to get that clip in there.
The poster of Tom Cruise is like seared in my memory. And it's one of those things where it's like the first time I watched it, and also in subsequent viewings, sometimes I'll go, oh, so it's like an interview with a vampire. Because I was young, and so that just kind of read as poetry jargon, like nonsense to me as a child. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh no, it's literally what those words mean.
Yeah.
I saw this when I was 18. It was that glorious summer between 17 and 18 where I had graduated high school. And in my opinion, this was one of the first, like, quote unquote, adult movies I saw. Because it's like I had seen R-rated movies before, but they were either the scary movies or they were like something about Mary.
Yeah, like a sex comedy.
Yeah. And so this was one of the first times that I remember watching a movie and being like, cinema, it's like kind of it very. Do you remember that feeling? Like
I do, I really do. And this movie is hilariously that in a way.
I was like, this is what movies are, and
it's like intro to grown-up cinema.
Yeah, because it's like there was a handful of times in my life I attempted to diary or journal, and I wasn't very good at it because I realized I was performing what I thought journaling was versus actually journaling.
God, me too.
Yeah.
I would get so mad at myself. I would like write stuff and I would do it for like a week or 2 or 3 sometimes. And then I would go back and read the first one and I'd be like, this is the dumbest fucking shit I've ever heard in my life. And I would rip it all out and throw it away.
Yeah, I remember writing like several pages about this movie and being like, the first time I saw the real movie and like that kind of thing. But it was a really exciting summer. It was the summer. Well, first of all, that year I had completely come into my own, just like every possible which way. Mm-hmm. And I graduated high school. And in spring, in June, I went to go visit my friend Kirsten, who had moved to California 2 years prior. And so both being 17, we spent like an entire weekend at the movies. And we saw several movies, 2 of which I remember were Cold Creek Manor and Underworld.
Oh, right. That was the Underworld trip, wasn't it?
Uh-huh. And so I came back from California obsessed with vampires. And
okay, no, that suits.
I honestly was like, man, I have discovered something amazing. And so that summer was when we found out that the Merritts had Laserdisc.
Oh, right.
And they had a huge collection of, because this is also when we discovered Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Which is better than this movie, but in a different way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I honestly think this is a better movie in that the problem with Bram Stoker's Dracula is it's boring. But
well, yeah, and that's fair. You don't frequently. It's not a frequent, oh, you know what I really want to watch out of nowhere? Bram Stoker's Dracula. I'm much more inclined to just throw on Interview with the Vampire. It's
also kind of like Sound of Music, where it's like all the good stuff is in the first 40 minutes. And then you're like, okay, I'm done. Yeah. So I remember watching this movie and being just mesmerized because of the gay subtext. And revisiting it, I was curious to see what that was going to be like. And to my surprise, it both surpassed my expectations and also underwhelmed me. Like it's kind of like I remembered it being gayer because at that time this was a post True Blood or pre True Blood world,
right? So
it's like I remember it being gayer, but so on one level I was kind of disappointed, but on another level, there's a part of me where I'm like, oh, they're not even pretending. Like,
no,
they're not saying the words.
Gay.
Yeah, I was like, they're not saying the words, but it's in a very Hays Code place where you're like, oh, it's explicitly clear what is happening here. Like,
right. That was the thing for me where I was like, it's weirdly somehow every time I watch this movie, it somehow feels gayer than the time before. Again, like you said, still pretty tame there, but they are doing everything except actually explicitly stating it. And like, at more than one point, I could swear on my life that Antonio Banderas and Brad Pitt actually kiss, and they just don't.
I've never not seen that scene, tonight included.
I know.
And not gone, this is the time they're going to do it.
Exactly.
This is the time that they're going to kiss.
Me too.
And I've just blocked it. Like, it's so bizarre in a way that, like, it made me mad when I was younger, but now it's like, I'm not even mad. I'm just impressed. Like,
yeah. Because I'm pretty sure in the book,
Oh, it's, yeah.
That they definitely bone down. Because I've only read one of the Vampire Chronicles, and it's the one about Antonio Banderas' character. And he is fucking dudes all which ways.
Yeah. How are they as books? Are they readable, or are they like...
It's not like a romance novel, if that's what you mean. No, it's like, I mean, they're readable. The problem is I didn't keep reading them, and then I found out that Anne Rice is like a real bitch, and so now I don't want to.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, art from the artist.
They are making that new show, though, so maybe.
Thank the Lord, because there was part of me when this movie ended, and I was like, how did they not do a sequel to this? Because I think it was a hit, was it not?
Will said the exact same thing.
Yeah? Did you guys watch it together? He said the
exact same thing. No, but he came out towards the end to the living room, and he was like, this really felt like a surefire way, like a surefire franchise. Like, and this was like a pretty well received, right? And I was like, yeah, I think so. I was like, these 4 of the hottest, male actors of the early 90s.
I have never in my life not seen Christian Slater at the beginning of this movie and been like, I forget every time.
Every time. Well, because he's only at the very beginning and the very end, and then like 2 points in the middle.
And he is super hot.
He's super hot.
I'm well on the record as liking the 90s aesthetic.
Well, yeah. I was really surprised too, or like when Will said he was surprised it hadn't gone further, I was like, well, Anne Rice is notoriously terrible to work with, and she was like kind of uppity about this movie also, and because she really didn't, until she saw it, she really didn't like the way that they cast it with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt.
I don't think anybody does, even the people who like the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think they should be swapped, because why would you take the brown-haired man and make him blonde, and the blonde-haired man and make him a brunette? But whatever.
Well, because also Tom Cruise's wig for the whole second part of the movie is terrible. And
yeah, it's
then
not
the
great.
one he has at the very end is passable, and it's like,
Yeah.
And that's just Brad Pitt's hair, like. So yeah. I mean, it's darker than it usually is, because he is a natural blonde, but.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's so strange to me, because I know that he did Legends of the Fall very close to this, and that is his real long blonde hair in that. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, you couldn't even have dyed his real hair, because Brad Pitt is absolutely wearing a wig as well. His hair doesn't look that way.
Hair. Yeah, no, it's his hair.
Well, then they made it look bad.
It's like poofy. It's absolutely his hair, because there's a scene where he turns around and whatever they did to it, however they treated it, like flat ironed, they didn't do the back.
Oh,
so it's like kinky in the back from his like waves from, I'm assuming it was hot on set. You know how? No, that's absolutely his hair. Because there's also a scene where he's like, I mean, there might be pieces in it, but he's like laying on the ground, and the way it's like lifted up, you can just tell.
Well, if anybody wants better Brad Pitt hair from this same era, watch Legends of the Fall, because it's incredible.
Especially watching it again this time, I was kind of like, man, they really should be flipped. But a good halfway through, I was like, but I don't know that I want to see that. It's like, I don't know that because I don't really like Lestat. I feel like we're not supposed to. And it's
he's
like
kind of a shitbag.
Yeah, I think Tom Cruise pulls off the smarmy better than Brad Pitt does. And to be honest, Brad Pitt, first of all, he's kind of bad in this movie.
He's super bad in this movie. You don't have to. I think Brad Pitt is an extremely gifted actor. I think he's pretty bad in this movie.
he's pretty bad in this movie. And also, his character is such a drip. It's that character that you can't stand.
Louis is such a shitty vampire, where he just is like, the first time he's feeding and he's like, I will not take her life. And I'm just like,
so
what the
Angel
fuck, man?
In season 2 of Buffy, season 3.
It really. That is accurate.
It's so bad. So getting into it, I do like this mythos, this vampire mythos, because with every vampire property, you have to take on like a whole new mythos. And sometimes, I mean, I definitely appreciate when artists try to put their own stamp on something, but I also sometimes hate when they're like, we're not like other vampire movies. And so I think it works really well in this one. And I do tend to like when they throw the restraints off of the vampires, which, I mean, with the exception of Sunlight, this is pretty unrestrained. You know what I mean? There's no silver, there's no garlic, there's no...
Yeah, I find it interesting the things she like chose to stick with, like the coffins is such an interesting thing that like is apparently necessary, but the rest of it is really, like you said, nothing except for the sunlight. I agree. It is weird where with all the different mythos, especially like, I mean, I totally get it, the like Vampire Diaries of it all, where like they have to be able to interact in the daytime, but it's like we are now on season 2 of Legacies and they are handing out daylight rings like candy.
Yeah, you've talked about that, and it's like that because that's the only way, that's the only reality where I could be a vampire. I could never not have the sun in a way that I mean, you would have done it before I finished this sentence.
Yeah, oh for sure. Yeah. I would have been a vampire for 10 years already if it were possible.
I think it's because I used to watch movie magic, because I had a lot of very vivid memories of behind the scenes stuff from this movie. Because I remember that they used to have to sit upside down in chairs for like 20 minutes to do their makeup so that they could draw the veins on them and stuff.
Oh, funny.
Because Kirsten Dunst hated it. She hated a lot of filming in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, she was only like 11.
Yeah.
I would have hated that too.
And that's another thing that I think is really, really fascinating about this movie is it came out in such a time where, especially from like a movie making, like technological advancement place, it's like a nearly perfect movie because there's a handful of times where they leaned into the flashy new special effects, like their transformation into vampires.
Well, also there's the moment where Claudia feeds Lestat the dead boys and then slits his throat, and they do something to him in post to make him...
That's a doll. It's a dummy.
Part of it is, but they do something to Tom Cruise's face while he's like gasping on the ground and still trying to come after them. It's incredible. I was watching it today and I was like, that looks amazing.
No, I remember that is not Tom Cruise. It's a mannequin. It's a doll that they're pulling the skin back on and stuff.
Interesting.
It was, and I was like, this looks really good. Because I can just remember, and you can kind of tell the way he's moving, like it's kind of a jerky back and forth movement. It's an animatronic. And there are a handful of digital, like towards the end when he sets the Parisians on fire, one of them climbing on the roof is like a digital effect, but it's just like it's up there with like Jurassic Park, and there's like a handful of movies where it's like they knew exactly what they were doing, and they didn't overshoot anything in a way that like 2 or 3 years later they were like, we'll just CG it, and it's like, who?
Exactly.
You're not there yet. Rewatching it was interesting. Frankly, because I saw Thandie Newton in the credits, and I was like, right. And I was like, that's weird that she's in the credits. Because I weirdly remembered her being the whore in New Orleans.
No.
And she is not.
No, she's Louis' slave.
Yeah. The kind and innocent seamstress whose innocence will lead to her downfall.
Leads to her downfall, exactly.
The trusting and honest seamstress. That stuff, man. Revisiting things sometimes, like just the passage of time is fascinating, and then revisiting things is fascinating because the first 20 minutes you're like, ooh.
Yeah, we're in a weird spot here.
Yeah, I was like, because I remember being like 18 and being like, well, he's like a good master and stuff, and I was just like, oh, that's not how that works.
Like, it's also heavily implied that he's visiting the slave quarters.
Yeah, I was like,
just like,
it watches differently in this climate, and
as an adult in the year 2020.
Yeah, and with having kind of grown, I was just like, whew.
Yeah.
And it's movies like this that paint the bad impression, that give people the wrong image, but it's like, so I just had to mention that. It was more than I was like, I was like, I didn't notice that when I was a kid. And Thandie is so beautiful. I prefer her now, like, completely.
Yeah.
Because in this movie, I get my favorite tableau, or one of my favorite tableaus, twice. It's like the man carrying the dead woman in a gown. I love that tableau, and I get it twice in this movie. And I mean, it's very grand, and and I do kind of love the notion that like the slaves are so completely onto them, and that they're like doing what appears to be like hoodoo or something out in the to try and like rid the evil.
Literally anything to get this sick, quote unquote, sickness off our land.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. But the horrors in New Orleans, that's an interesting scene. I glanced at the reviews. It has a 62, which I think it should have a little bit better than that. But in general, they're like, in spite of its flaws, it's very positive. One of the reviews, I can't remember if it was positive or negative, but they were like, it's perfectly fine. But they were like, it's neither scary nor campy enough to become an actual classic. And I was like, I'm gonna beg to differ on both of those counts.
Yeah.
Like, especially the campy one, This movie gets melodrama. It goes to melodrama a handful of times. Like the scene with the whore when she's quote unquote dying and Lestat puts her in the coffin and everything. Like,
yeah,
that's high.
Well, that is Lestat's whole vibe is melodrama. Lestat is like the most melodramatic bitch in existence.
And I just love, because another thing that I really like about the mythos in this is that for the most part, the bite is seduction. It's like you don't, it's like a mosquito, where it's like, if a mosquito stings you, there's like a enzyme in their saliva that you don't feel it unless you're like looking for it to happen. And so when he bites the people, they're kind of, it's almost more arousing than it is scary or painful. I'm really into that. And because there's a handful of times where it's like the like wench in the beginning where Brad Pitt is just like eating her mouth. And it's kind of like, on one hand, I'm like, but on the other hand, I'm like, that's actually it's interesting imagery.
Well, it also, though, for me, is like, there's no major blood vessels there. You're doing yourself a disservice.
Because there's an implication that they can also just sort of feed on people. Like,
well, they can, yes. And which is like what Louis wants to do, but Lestat won't let him, essentially.
Okay, well, that was dumb.
Well, I mean, I tend to agree, but it's in all of the vampire stuff that I like. It's in the Buffy universe because they like are capable of stopping like eating people, and it's in the Vampire Diaries because that's like Stefan's whole deal is he can't stop once he starts, but the rest of them can all glamour people to not pay attention. And in True Blood, they can stop in the middle.
And that's better explored in scripted. Like in
television. For sure. Than a movie, And I don't know. I've never read Interview with the Vampire, so I'm not sure if they get into that.
I also want to talk a lot about Kirsten Dunst in this movie.
By all means. She's amazing in this movie.
I don't know how she's not third billed, because she's like beyond the title card. And I was like, come on. She really... I mean, well, she's the third lead, and she carries a lot of this movie, 11-year-old Kirsten Dunst. And there was a period in time where I decided I didn't like her, and I don't remember why, because I love her now. I think she's great. But I used to joke where I would be like, what's it like peaking at 11? You know? And actually, a fun bit of trivia, that is her first kiss, period.
Yeah, I knew that.
And that's fun. That's her first kiss is 90s Brad Pitt.
Yeah, apparently she really hated it. Like it was just weird and awkward. She had like it's like not a fun memory for her. Yeah,
she understands the role though, because it's a mature role, and
for sure
she really gets it, and it's one of the more fascinating parts of the whole movie. And it's another place, not unlike the gayness, where you're sort of like, what precisely is happening here? And it's very interesting. And I do love once they finally start dressing her in like adult clothes.
Yeah, same. Well, it's once they like, quote unquote, kill Lestat and she's just with Louis, because Louis loves her and is like, I'll like give you whatever you want.
And I do love the distinction between her young and her old. Like you can tell through Kirsten's performance.
Yeah, she's a very good actress.
Because this movie's actually why I know the term avant-garde. Because she has that line, how avant-garde.
And she's like vampires pretending to be humans, pretending to be vampires. How avant-garde.
Because they give her material, like the Cajun woman that she kills and then keeps, the nude Cajun woman that she keeps in her dolls. That's like staggering stuff. And
the whole like she doesn't come to the realization that she won't grow old until they're like 30 years in. Like they're decades in, and then she comes to the realization and she gets so angry about it. And I think
just keep giving her like dolls, like girls.
Well, that's the thing, is it's mostly Lestat that's doing that's like keeping her so childlike. And I think her relationship with each of them individually is so interesting, because Lestat is like a father and Louis is like a brother in a way. That is such a fascinating juxtaposition between each other. And then even further to that, it's implied that she also might be a lesbian because she wants that woman for a companion at the end. And you get the implication that it's like potentially also sexual.
That I'm not sure of. I'm definitely not saying no. I always took that as being a mother, that she wanted, like, a mother.
I think a little yes, but I think the deliberate use of the word companion is specific.
I forgot how beautiful that woman was, too, when they, like, showed her.
So pretty. I was like,
it's
such a waste.
Yeah, well, because she's seared in my memory because of that scene. And I'm like, oh, she's, like, not in this movie hardly at all.
No, not like at all.
It's something that I find interesting, that that homosexual relationships tend to go hand in hand with not only supernatural, but especially vampire mythology, because it's sort of like when you're removing biology from the equation, a lot of times people tend to cavort with the like sex, like. Well,
it's also, and I've mentioned this like 3 times in the last week for different scenarios, but it kind of is like that Bacchus on the Magicians, where he's like, once you've had quantity, all that's left is strange. And it's like, you kind of just go for whatever. If you were an immortal being and you claim you would not have sex with the same gender, at the very least, you're lying. I think you're lying.
Going back to Dracula, the homosexual implications are because they are corrupted. So it's turning against nature and that kind of stuff. From a several places removed high fantasy entertainment place, I sort of wear some of those tropes like a badge of honor, like queer coded villains. It's like, I actually kind of like that, It's like, I was mad Mufasa wasn't gay, or Scar wasn't gayer
in the new one. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's like, there's a part of me that like embraces the whole, well, they're evil, so of course they're gay, because all gays are evil. It's like the Sabrina stuff.
At a certain point, it just kind of gets like very tongue-in-cheek, and you're like, well, of course. So yeah, I get it.
It's stuff like that I'm kind of like super into. I'm a stickler for rules, frankly, but especially like poetic symmetry and poetic justice and stuff. That's one of the reasons why I don't get quite as annoyed by Bury the Gays. It depends on how they're doing it. You know what I mean? It's like, there are certain characters that it's like, I don't really consider Tara Bury the Gays, but other people do. And so, or the same with the Magicians.
Yeah, agreed with that too.
Yeah, but anyways, we didn't talk about Antonio Banderas.
The vampire Armand.
You like Armand, okay.
I do kind of like Armand. Well, I told you his is the only book I've ever read.
I forget that he wasn't involved in killing Claudia.
No.
So my memory blames him, and then I get to it, I was like, oh, right.
Well, not directly, but it was his people who did it, and he didn't stop them because he wanted Louis for himself. So it's like still kind of gross, but it's not, he didn't make them do it. Stephen Rea did. Santiago.
Fucker.
Yeah, I know, right?
It makes me so angry, that stupid bitch with like the time to pay every single time. It like gets me heated. And
me too. I'm like, who do you think you are? Just busting in here from some Julie Taymor movie with that attitude and that voice.
It's terrible. Yeah. And it's such like gratifying reward, like gratifying experience when Brad Pitt gets his revenge with the scythe.
Just douses them all in kerosene and then cuts them in half with a scythe. It is amazing.
I also have a note that just with a little heart that just says Brad Pitt's unibrow.
He is a very handsome man in 1994. It's
one of the greats. I don't like hideous unibrows, but like a Josh Hartnett or that situation, I'm all about. I have a note that says, man, Lestat really gets what for in this movie. I forgot that they killed him twice.
Like thrice, yeah.
And back to back to back. I was kind of like, oh God.
He gets killed a handful of times, and he keeps popping back up. That is one of the things, that's one of the weird things where I feel, because of how this movie operated and because I've read The Vampire Armand, I feel like all of the Vampire Chronicles kind of hinge around Lestat in a weird way, because there is the scene with the helicopter and...
What the fuck is that scene? That scene has never made sense to me.
So I'll get there.
Okay.
Basically, that scene also features in The Vampire Armand. which I thought was really weird. Basically, Lestat has been like to ground the whole time because she poisoned him with the dead blood. She slit his throat. They put him in the swamp with the alligators, but he managed to survive by like eating the alligators and all of the like nasty shit. And then he came back and tried to kill them. And then they set him on fire or like left him in the burning house, but he still managed to survive. But then he evidently has like gone to ground for like 200 years until he pops back up at the end.
10 fires in this movie. Sorry,
he really does so many fires. But so he pops back up until like the 80s or whenever Brad Pitt goes to see Superman, I guess.
They said 88 at one point.
Yeah. And so that's when Brad Pitt sees him again for the first time in like 200 years. And he, I think, is just like so weakened from all of the killing that they did to him that he like hasn't been able to do kind of anything. And if I'm remembering correctly, in the Vampire Armand, he has like people kind of helping him. Like, he has other vampires that are, minions. Like, around, but I think they took that, like, away. Not even really minions, just kind of, like, assistants, almost. But it's been easily 10 years since I read that. But that kind of stuff, like, that scene is in it, and so it's really weird, and basically, he's just so far gone that he, like, doesn't know anything about technology or anything, so when the helicopter shines the light in the window, he, like, freaks out because he thinks it's the sun.
No, I understand all that. I don't understand what the helicopter is doing just on the second floor of this like abandoned mansion, shining a light in at these two vampires who are like acting like wackos and then just flying off.
I think I think the helicopter is incidental.
It was so deliberate, though. It's not.
Close. It's not like looking for them, but they're.
But it literally was, though. It was like, where'd you go? Where'd you go? Like,
but
that part was shoddy. It was poorly filmed.
I think that if they're in an abandoned warehouse in New Orleans, there's probably crimes taking place nearby, and that's what I always assumed. So I guess I don't know if that's right or not.
These two wackos acting like total like. That was suspicious, their behavior when...
I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying that's never how I read it. So
that has baffled me every single time. Where it's like I'm imagining like Abner, come quick! Like I'm imagining like a nosy neighbor's calling the cops because someone's broken into this this whatever mansion that he's in, this decrepit mansion has just been abandoned for 200 years. Like there were corpses within the garden and stuff. I don't know. It's movies. That's the kind of stuff you gotta let go. But that's one of the parts of the movie where I was like,
yeah. I mean, it could potentially make sense if I had read the book.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I understood the concept of him not getting technology.
Oh, okay.
But I actually love that in this movie, the vampires are all relatively young.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I hate when, like, so many, especially when you're in, like, episode 3 of a new show, and it's like, I'm 7,000 years old. And I'm like, that's too many years. That is too many years old.
So, to be fair, I want to say the oldest vampire from a TV show is True Blood that I've ever encountered is like Eric and Godric.
No, there was someone older. I don't remember, but I feel like far too often they're like ancient in a way that I'm like, even with immortality, like even with eternal youth and beauty, I would get bored around 150, 200 years.
Some of the Twilight ones are really old, I guess. I don't know. I actually often have the opposite problem where like so many of them are like somehow there's like a hard out at the Civil War where like you can't be older than the Civil War if you're a vampire, and I'm just like, what? I
wish I could think of examples because like, I know I feel passionately the opposite. Like
because like Stefan and Damon from the Vampire Diaries are both from the Civil War, and like Bill's from the Civil War, and like Edward from Twilight is from the early 1900s.
I get the Civil War being a significant like marker, but
I don't know. I just think it's weird. On A Discovery of Witches, he's like 1500.
That's so old.
I like it. It's good.
Well, on that note. So yeah, revisiting it, it's more than I remembered. It was better than I remembered, or as good as I remembered. I'll say that.
Yeah.
It was more brutal than I remembered.
Yeah, it was like really a lot bloodier than I remembered, for real. And I feel like I've watched it within the last 2 years.
Yeah, even still, it's not gory in the way that like a torture porn movie would be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course not.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad to have revisited this. I'm glad that I liked it, and it's re-earned its spot for another decade.
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So.
Happy Mardi Gras.
Woo!
Yeah.
Laissez les bon temps rouler. We should have done Princess and the Frog.
Oh man, where was your brain earlier? I would have absolutely done the Princess and the Frog. Well, let us know what you think. If hopefully you've seen the Interview with the Vampire, or else we just ruined all of it for you. So yeah, let us know what you think on Twitter @SoI'mWatching, Instagram @SoI'mWatchingThis show. You can also follow along on our website, soimwatching.com, which links out to everything. And other than that, you can rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen. And that's it for us. Bye.